Good job. We could do the whole thing and not record it.
Now I'm recording. Greetings, and welcome to the Talk with Richie podcast. I am your host, Scott, here with my wife and historian, Jen.
Hello.
On this podcast, we talk about history's continuing impact on us today and our personal journey through YouTube as we continue to explore, record, and share our history walks with you. Now, for today's podcast, there really isn't much that I need to do to introduce one of the most famous locations in America, the National Mall in Washington, D.C. It's full of history, so Jen, let's just jump right in.
Sure.
Where did we start?
So the mall, you know, when I say the D.C. Mall, people are always like, the shopping mall, but that's what we refer to as that big grassy area in Washington, D.C. that's it's adorned with monuments and markers to the people who have shaped this country.
Yeah.
And it's visited by over 25 million people a year.
Yeah.
It's free, so you can walk around, you can go at any time.
And it's beautiful. It's clean, it's well kept.
Yes, and tons of history. So we started at the Thomas Jefferson Memorial.
Yeah.
And I had actually never been there before.
That was my first time too.
And so you see it.
Yep.
You know, you can always go, oh, there it is. But I had never actually gone inside.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. So it's a huge statue of Thomas Jefferson inside. He's bronze. And then the outside are the pillars. And we went during the cherry blossoms.
Oh, it was gorgeous.
So right around the tidal basin.
It was so pretty. Like everything was in full bloom and there was petals everywhere. It was awesome.
It was awesome. So when I say tidal basin, it's that curve of the mall around the water.
Because it's basically kind of like a big, almost like an L, more like a U.
Yes. And that's when people say the cherry blossoms on the tidal basin, that's what they mean. Yeah. But Jefferson was the third president. That monument was built from 1939 to 1943 under FDR. And it really goes into they have like a bunch of like his sayings around him, things that he wrote.
Quotes, yeah.
And it celebrates him as more than just president, but like a scientist, an inventor, an architect. Like the pillars on the outside are his architectural idea.
Yeah.
And so it kind of is more to him than just the president. But of course, he's the author of the Declaration of Independence. So they have that on the wall. It's the statue is 19 feet.
Yeah,
and
it was a lot bigger than I expected it to be.
10,000 pounds.
Yeah.
Like it's huge. And you can actually see it at night. If you kind of look through the pillars, you can see the statue in there. It's lit up. But he's holding the Declaration in his hand. So that's what he's standing there holding. But the statue was dedicated, I think, like in 1947. So after FDR. Yeah. So the monument was there first, and then they put in the statue.
Yeah. No, it was really, really cool. And we actually went to kind of give the larger picture of like how we were filming this. I mean, we did this with our kids.
Yes.
We did this with family.
My mom in the
electric
wheelchair.
Electric wheelchair. Although she didn't start there with us. So I actually dropped her off.
It was a lot.
And then kind of like hoofed it from Lincoln down to the Jefferson Memorial in my steel-toed boots, which actually like gave me issues later that I suffered for.
So that's advice I always try to give people in Washington, D.C., because you can see everything pretty clearly. You think it's closer than it actually is. And it's not that close.
I think I want to say it's about a mile and a half between the Lincoln Memorial and the Jefferson Memorial.
Oh, I believe it, because there have been so many times I've seen the Washington Monument, so the big obelisk in the middle of Washington, and I'm like, oh, that's not far. We can make it there, no problem. And you'll be walking for like 20 minutes, and you're not even closer, and it looks...
Yeah, I think we walked I think I probably walked, because I did a bunch of extra, right, dropping your mom off, and then coming to get you guys, and then walking back, and all this stuff. I mean, I probably walked, jogged, whatever, in steel-toe boots for like 5 or 6, maybe 7 miles that day.
And that's good advice, because it is very walkable.
Yes.
And that is the best way to see it, because you can't really drive from monument to monument.
Yeah.
It's not an easy city to drive.
And there are folks who bike around a little bit, but I would say it's probably better to walk because you kind of really get the experience.
Yes.
And especially more going through what's the next monument we walked through, which was FDR.
Which is awesome.
It was really cool.
If you haven't seen the FDR monument yet, I definitely recommend getting out there. It was only built in 1997. And in 2001, they actually put a cloak around FDR to kind of, I wouldn't say hide the wheelchair, but they wanted to, kind of
de-emphasize it.
De-emphasize it.
Yeah.
So they put the cloak around that, but it's dedicated to his 4 terms of office, and it's basically a walking monument. So you walk through each term. Yeah. And as we walked it backwards, but if you walk it forward like you're supposed to.
Yeah, if you're walking from the Lincoln Memorial to the Jefferson.
That's the way you should walk it.
Yeah.
And that will go in sequence of his time in office.
Yep.
And they'll have different kind of monuments. They have his fireside chats.
Yeah, that's cool.
They have people standing in line for the Depression.
Yeah, the bread lines.
And what's really neat is they have a water feature.
That was cool.
And the water will get more and more complex as his terms go on.
Right.
Because as his presidency goes on, he's going to take America into World War II.
Yeah.
And it's going to get more and more difficult and complex. And so that's what that water feature is supposed to
Yeah, that was something
represent.
that I had seen it before. I had been to the mall before, but I had never heard that. And the kind of the reasoning behind that. And so I actually specifically kind of looked for it. And the water wasn't running while we were there.
No, but you could
could still tell.
Yes.
It was really neat.
So he's our 32nd president, brings us through the Depression and World War II, has 4 terms, the only president to have 4 terms.
Yep.
Now you're not allowed to have 4 terms, but and it was a rarity even then because he wanted to bring America through the war.
Yeah.
He felt like he was with America in the beginning and he wanted to see it through.
Yeah.
So that was why he served 4 terms.
Yeah. And being there again, I'm going to foot stomp this because if anybody listening to this can pick a time to go when the cherry blossoms are in bloom, which is April-ish.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we were there.
Easter.
Right around
Mm-hmm.
Easter, spring break time frame. I think it gives you a completely different experience being there with those cherry blossoms. And again, me being the kind of more cinematic camera guy, I loved it. It was great. It was just gorgeous to shoot.
Yes. And it's like I said, it's open air rooms,
Yep.
big granite, and they have some of his famous speeches and things that he said, quotes.
Yeah, and I think
the granite.
I think they had his wife there.
Yeah, Eleanor Roosevelt has her own statue, of course, because she was such an influential first lady. But just a lot of quotes that he had said, and I think there's almost a touching wall. Remember, we had talked about that.
Yeah, like a braille.
Yes, like a braille. So they were talking about disabilities and handicaps and trying to embracing that.
Yeah.
So there was a braille wall,
which back then was not embraced.
No, that's why FDR.
They kind of hid it.
Yeah, he tried not to have any pictures taken of him in the wheelchair,
and
that's why the front of the Resolute desk was put on so people wouldn't see him in the wheelchair. And at the time, the press was very accommodating to that for him.
Yeah, it wouldn't be that way nowadays, but
yeah,
it was. I don't know if that was my favorite one, but that was up there.
It was pretty cool.
It was pretty neat.
Well, the next one, Martin Luther King, I had never seen before.
So I hadn't either because it's not a lot of these you can kind of see from the road, right? The Jefferson Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, but the MLK one, it's I wouldn't say it's tucked away. It's just not easily viewable from the road.
It has a great view of the tidal basin.
Yes,
but you have to walk over to it, and it's neat. It's kind of like he's coming out of the mountain. It's like he's cut out of the mountain, moving forward. And that's also a new one, 2011. It's called the Stone of Hope. It's 30 feet high, and he's only the 4th non-president to be memorialized on the mall.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. So as we're doing this, and you're kind of telling me about it, almost as like a warm up for you to actually say it on camera. I mean, I was learning things left and right. Yeah. You know, I got to see all his like super famous quotes.
Yeah. So
right. So walking up to it, there's like a bunch of his famous quotes from his speeches and stuff like that are kind of carved into the wall. So you're walking up to that, and then here he is, like kind of like you said. You can tell it's kind of
he's 30 feet high,
intended to kind of be coming out of this this stone embankment, which you'll then walk behind him,
Yes.
on to the next
Yes.
one. But the MLK one was really, really neat. And you did say that there's some people kind of said that there was a little bit of controversy because the stone is white.
It's white.
Right.
So I had, when I went to grad school at the University of Memphis, we had talked about this monument, and some of my fellow cohort in my class who were African American said, why would you have a monument to Martin Luther King and make it white? And I never thought about that, but it's true. It is.
That's a good point.
Bright white.
Yeah.
But do you know the other three people who are on the mall that are not presidents?
I did when I was making the video a year ago. I do not anymore.
So John Paul Jones.
That's right.
John Erickson. It's kind of like a forefather of America.
Yeah.
And George Mason, also
George Mason,
a forefather to America.
Yeah, good old JPJ, I know. Father of the Navy.
I know. So after MLK is Korea.
Yeah, so you will kind of walk behind MLK, and then you will kind of walk along the path over towards the Korean.
And you'll be walking, and you'll see the Korean Memorial is so cool. It was built in 1982 to 1992 to 1995, and it's called the column because it's supposed to be men walking in a column as if they're on patrol.
Yep.
And they're life size.
Yeah.
So it's so neat.
And you can kind of walk between them.
It's really cool, and it's 19 men, 14 Army, 3 Marine Corps, 1 Navy, 1 Air Force, all representation.
Yep.
And it's just they have like their ponchos. It looks like it's harsh weather because Korea was harsh weather. And
they're walking through marshy, whatever.
Yeah, marshy. Yeah, it's such a neat memorial, I think, because it's so lifelike to be there.
Yeah, that one you almost feel like it's trying to take you there more than anything else, more than any of the other monuments, in my opinion, because it's almost more about the scene than it is about any specific person.
Yes, and I think because they call it the Forgotten War, because most people forget Korea, because it's relatively fast lifespan wise, right? Like MASH, they say about the Korean War was longer than the actual Korean War.
That's right. Yeah.
And so I think when you walk through it like that, you're like, wow, I feel like a part of this.
Yeah.
It's a very, very neat monument. I really like it. They said 1.5 million people actually served in the Korean War. So it's dedicated to everyone who served. So there are pictures etched in, and you can see, and they do that again, representation. It's all services, and you see women, and you see everybody. It's kind of like depicts moments from the Korean War.
Yeah, and
that's really cool to see too.
Yeah, it was a neat one, and again, we were there, and it was spring break, April timeframe. So there was a fair amount of people out.
But you could still, I mean, if you see the video, I still got pretty good vantage points.
Yeah, it wasn't super crowded or anything like that.
And after that was Lincoln.
Yeah, which the Lincoln Memorial, that might be one of the biggest just area-wise ones on the entire mall.
And that's where people want to go.
That's so cool.
It's so cool. And who did we see when we were there?
So we saw, and I didn't even notice it. I think you did more. I think you more heard his voice. So we saw a very famous actor.
Yes, we did.
So who'd we see?
Denzel Washington.
That's right.
We heard him and we saw him.
Right.
And I think, did he look at us and wave at us or something?
No, I don't think he waved at us. No. I think JR and Tiffany went over.
My brother.
Yeah. So they went over and tried to get his attention, but he was actually there
filming a movie,
and he was actually, I think he was teaching like some George Washington film students or something like that.
I think it was Howard.
Was it Howard?
I think it was Howard.
So, but there was you could tell there were students there with him, and he was talking them through probably some sort of course or just like a guest for something or other.
Yeah, something like that. But he was filming that movie that's now out, Michael B. Jordan. Yes, Letters from Home or something.
Yes, I think that's the movie.
Yeah, they were filming that right on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial.
Yeah, which I didn't see. I don't remember seeing Michael B. Jordan.
I don't think he was in the scene.
And the funny part was, it's like when you pointed Denzel Washington out, the only way I could tell who he was, because everybody was kind of still, a lot of people were still wearing masks even outside at the time, but I could tell by his walk.
Yes.
So I could tell by his walk. I was like, that's Denzel Washington. I can't see his face because this guy's wearing a mask and a baseball cap.
Yeah.
And it was pretty cold.
It was.
So he was wearing a big, thick jacket, but I could tell by his walk. It's crazy. Like you've seen someone in enough movies that you could tell he kind of had that Denzel walk.
Yeah, he had that swagger.
So that was pretty cool.
It was pretty cool, and it was neat to see the Lincoln. I mean, I every time we go to Lincoln Memorial, I love it. So 16th president, of course, a great emancipator. You know, you have the Gettysburg Address on one side of the monument. You have the Emancipation Proclamation on the other side of the monument. It's 36 columns for the 36 states during the Civil War. It was built from 1912 to 1922, and his son was there for the dedication.
And we actually went there probably 2 or 3 times while we were there. So we went there actually the night before. Was it the night before that we went there? And you actually found the spot where MLK stood.
Yes. So we went there that day and I had seen it and we took pictures of it.
We went back.
We went back that night and people kept asking where it was. And what they do there to make it so picturesque is they really make it super dark on the steps and around and really lit up inside. Yeah. So the statue really glows.
But you can't see much on the steps.
So I had to hold my light for my cell phone for people because it's just cut into the marble that says Martin Luther King.
Is it cut into it, or is there an actual marker?
No, it's cut into the marble. It says Martin Luther King stood here when he gave the I Have a Dream speech.
Yeah.
And so if you don't know where it is, you wouldn't be able to see it.
Yeah.
And so I showed a couple people that, but it was so beautiful to go there at night.
Yeah, it was like if you go there during the day, do your best to go back at night because it's almost a different experience, right? There's a little bit less people, but like you said, they're very intentional about their lighting setup. And a quick aside, that actually was a disadvantage to one of the people in the area when we were there. So we had gone inside. I think we had done some additional filming.
Yes,
taken some pictures or something like that. And then all of a sudden, like, what did we hear?
So we walked down some of the steps. So you just need to be very aware. The Lincoln Memorial is at the head of the reflecting pool.
Right.
And around the reflecting pool is different levels of granite steps. And you have to just be very aware of your footing and your steps because, like I said, it's dark.
Yeah.
They make it dark. So the Lincoln Memorial kind of glows.
Yep.
And you can rent those bikes around town.
E-bikes.
E-bikes, yes, which are kind of plastic bikes.
Yeah.
And there were a couple guys riding their bikes, and all of a sudden we hear this huge crash, plastic on granite.
To be perfectly honest, it didn't sound like a crash. It sounded like a small explosion.
Yes.
I mean, that was the first thing that popped across my mind. Maybe that's the military in me. But, I mean, everybody stopped because it just echoed throughout.
Yes.
It was so loud. And I think
he was riding on one level, and all of a sudden it jumped up to be about chest level granite.
And he just
he plowed into it.
He plowed zero. He probably didn't see it at all.
At all.
And I think it actually it probably damaged the bike pretty good. Some of them have like these like plastic box things on them or whatever like that. And I think that's what caused the sound. Is one of these plastic box things just kind of exploded off of this, and we were like, oh my gosh, what happened? But it turns out, like, you know, he had some buddies with him, and he ended up being okay.
He was okay. We checked. Don't worry. We didn't just walk away. He was just shocked, and that bike, I think, was destroyed. But so just be careful if you're out there at night. It's very dark. It's beautiful. It's safe, but you just need to be very aware of your footing, especially around the Lincoln Memorial.
But it was so cool because you've seen it in movies 100 times. You've seen it in pictures growing up and in school books and stuff like that.
Night at the museum.
Like at Night at the Museum, I kept thinking of Forrest Gump.
Yes.
Right? I kept thinking of that. Like it was just, it's so neat.
Abraham Lincoln is seated and he has like a passive pose, passive face, kind of just looking out. Yeah. And he, like I said, it's the head of the reflecting pool. Yeah. So he is looking out onto the Washington Monument. Like that's what he sees. So it's just like a very head place of the monuments.
Yeah, it was really, really neat. It's actually surprisingly tricky to get an Uber over there.
Yes.
So you just like, now they all know like where to drop people off and this, that, and the other, but trying to get picked up, like, again, you have to be super aware of kind of where you're going to be. And you like, they're not just, there's no common stopping spot.
No.
So that you have to like, just kind of, up your senses a little bit.
And it's a difficult city to drive. So
yeah.
just be aware.
Yeah. I would highly recommend, just taking an Uber or taxi, metro, whatever. I think we talked about this before the podcast. You really can't park and drive anywhere.
No.
Not around the mall. You might be able to do it at like one end. But even then, like, I don't know where you would park near the Jefferson Memorial.
No, I think you might have to just park maybe by the Capitol.
Yeah.
And walk the other way.
And even that's really difficult. So just recommend
distance.
Parking much further away.
Yes.
Uber, Metro in. And then just plan on walking.
We stopped at the Vietnam Memorial.
Yes.
And that's always powerful.
It is.
So Vietnam Memorial, it looks like a V.
Yep.
And it was built in 1982. It has 247 kind of like columns. And it's 58,245 names of the people who gave their lives in order of life lost.
Yeah.
And of course, I stopped there and left a flag. I have a friend whose father was killed over Vietnam.
Yeah.
And he's still missing in action. So I left a flag for him. And it's people can leave anything there.
Yeah.
And that's one of those places you will see wreaths. You will see people have left. There was a group that left a Harley there.
Really? Mm-hmm. I didn't know that.
Left a Harley motorcycle there.
Holy cow.
So you can leave anything there. You're allowed to leave anything.
How did that? Now I have all sorts of questions.
I know.
That's crazy.
Pretty awesome.
So like the DC like mall, I'll just call him janitor. He's like, how the hell? I don't even know how to ride a bike. Right? You're like, how do I get this out of here?
It gets probably sold.
I'm sure.
And the money donated or something like that. But yes, you're allowed to leave anything there.
One of the interesting, was that the one that was designed by like a 25-year-old architecture student?
Maya Lin.
21.
21-year-old.
That I found super interesting.
Simplistic, but powerful.
Yeah.
Because of the V shape.
Yeah.
And then it has the 3 servicemen statue in bronze that was put in 1984.
Yeah, it's kind of off to the side.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And those, it's the first African American on the mall.
Yeah.
So that's a really neat one because it kind of shows the brotherhood of them all together and the shared hardship, kind of what that looked like.
Is that with the one with the nurses?
So there's also the nurses, and that's close by too. And that was built in 1993.
That was pretty neat.
And that's the 3 women nurses.
Yeah.
Now it's a little inaccurate because no Vietnam nurses were ever in combat.
That's right.
And so they're kind of taking care of a wounded.
It's symbolic.
It's symbolic.
Right.
Yes. But it's cool.
Yeah.
So you have one like looking up, probably looking for kind of like an air support.
Sure.
And another one's tending to like the wounded soldier, and another one's kind of like supporting both of them.
Yeah.
So it's very cool. But it's kind of like a together in unity kind of idea, I think. But what was neat that I never had seen before was that World War II memorial.
Oh, that was honestly my favorite one.
I had never seen that. It was beautiful.
I had never been to it. I don't remember seeing pictures of it, but that was honestly probably like one of the most moving ones for me. It's huge, and I think one of the reasons that I think it might have not be as commonly known or commonly seen in pictures is because it's kind of set down.
It's set lower.
It's set lower. So you kind of walk and then you walk down into it.
And you kind of don't even notice it. If you're looking at the reflecting pool, it's along the way to
the monument, Washington Monument.
Yeah. So it's not impeding the view.
Right.
Right. You can look past it. And so you don't really even know it's there unless you're looking for it.
It was really, really neat.
It's beautiful. So it has like 2 pavilions, one for the Atlantic, one for the Pacific.
Yep.
So for each kind of front. And then it has 56 pillars, and they represent the states and the areas and the sovereign countries that fought in World War II.
Yeah.
And then it has the stars for, I think each star represents 100 Americans, and there's 4,048 stars. And so all the lives that were lost in World War II.
And it's this big kind of like water fountains,
It's
and you can go down. And the nice thing is like the kids loved it. So you kind of walk down into this. And the nice thing is if it's windy, you kind of get out of the wind a little bit. So it's a little bit calmer down there, minus the water, right? And so it was just, I was just caught completely flat-footed when I got up to it. It was like, man, this is beautiful. And it reminded me of my grandparents.
Yes.
Right? That generation.
The greatest generation.
The greatest generation. I was just floored. And honestly, it probably was my favorite monument that we got to see.
Relatively new, 2004.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was that new.
Relatively new. But it's such a neat one. And I would definitely recommend, if you haven't seen that, to stop and see the World War II.
Yeah. And then from there, is that where you walk right on to the
Washington Monument?
Yeah.
So, of course, Washington Monument, that was one of the first monuments ever to be built. And it took forever. It took from 1848 to 1888 because they stopped during the Civil War.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. They're like, hey, guys, we need money for the war. Stop building the monument.
So people always say the different color stones are because of the War of 1812. No, the different color stones is because they stopped during the Civil War. Yeah. And then when they went to quarry the marble, they had to quarry it from another place. Yeah. So that's what the different color stones are for. It was halted for 23 years. They just, crazy. Didn't have the funds. But it's 555 feet.
Yep.
It's the tallest masonry obelisk. And it has 50 flags around it, which are beautiful. If they're all pristine, beautiful American flags that encircle it. And so it's supposed to have like kind of this meaning of the three branches of government, right? Because you can see the White House from there.
Right. Yep.
You can see the Capitol.
Yep.
And then you're supposed to be able to see the Supreme Court. And so you're supposed to be able to represent the three branches are all equal.
And you know what? I have seen it a bunch of times driving by it again. I think this is the first time I actually walked all the way up to it. And you can walk up to it and like touch it.
Yeah.
Like lean on it, like the kids sat down, were leaning. I for some reason, like in my head, I just didn't think that, right? But that's actually the case with most of these monuments. Is that you can just like walk right up and you can lean up against it, and you sit down and have lunch. Then you're good to go.
Yeah, it's there for you. So after the Washington Monument, the reflecting pool ends.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the mall is grass.
Yeah, and the Capitol's like behind.
Yeah,
the Washington
so then
Monument.
You can keep walking. There's more to see, like, so the James Garfield markers are further on down. There's more information and stuff to see.
Yeah, then you're not far from the Smithsonian Institute and all the
great place to picnic, and they always have food trucks out there.
Yeah.
So it's just a really great family.
Yeah, I think we wrapped it up with they had an ice cream food truck, which was great. I was like, this is perfect. We were like exhausted, right? We had walked. Our kids held in there, and I think that's just because we were walking the entire time. So I was super proud of them. I would say like the video this time probably wasn't as fun for me to make as actually doing the event. We got to walk so much, we got to see so much, we got to be walking through what's so iconic in our country. And the National Mall it's a bucket list trip for a lot of people, and we were no exception. So I felt lucky to be able to do this with my family as well as record it while covering all of the history that it contains. And if you haven't seen our Washington Mall video, I highly recommend it because perhaps you will learn something that you didn't know before. So thank you again for listening to the Talk with History podcast, and please reach out to us at our website, talkwithhistory.com. But more importantly, if you know someone else that might enjoy this podcast, please share this with them, especially if you think today's topic would interest a friend. Shoot them a text, tell them to look up the Talk with History podcast because we rely on you, our community, to grow, and we appreciate you all every day. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.